Hello and welcome to How We Coach. I'm Tom,
And I'm Jack.
and today this is the start of our new YouTube series.
Our episode today is effective feedback.
Great news if you're a John Wooden fan.
Indeed, the great UCLA basketball coach had some real gems up his sleeve, and we're going to start with one of our favourite quotations of his.
A coach is someone who can give correction without causing resentment.
And on this note, we are going to discuss how we feed back to the children that we coach,
We're going to look at
why we made the change,
how we now give effective feedback.
and the outcomes that we have observed from making these changes. Thomas, please start us off with those whys.
Well, last week we were both at a football match and we were watching a young child come off the pitch after a 3-0 win and a really good performance, only to be met with, "You really slowed down in the second half, didn't you?"
We are willing to bet that you have been on the receiving end of some careless feedback, whether it be from a coach, a teacher, or a parent, and you can remember the feeling of resentment that it caused.
We found this to be a problem because feedback is key for the players to perform at their maximum. We need feedback in order for the team to develop.
In addition to this, we found without effective feedback, our teams tended to argue in the middle of games.
We used to hear careless feedback being given on the pitch, which was usually quite over emotional and lacking perspective because if you're a player on the pitch, you can't see everything like a coach can.
A real bugbear of ours was when we were on the side of a pitch and we heard players asking rhetorical questions like, "Whose player was that?" when our team had conceded.
Rhetorical questions serve no other purpose than to publicly shame someone who's made a mistake.
This is an example of ineffective feedback.
Some children simply don't understand the purpose that feedback serves. They often feel like it's holding them back or totally unnecessary.
So, how do we now give effective feedback?
The first thing we do is we explain to the children what the point of feedback is. This is usually in our first session, but can be also reminders every single week.
It may seem simple, but we found that it was so important to explain that feedback is given not to attack somebody, not to embarrass them, but in order to help them develop.
We define effective feedback as giving advice without causing upset.
Something we've established in all of our teams is that anyone can give feedback,
But it has to be effective.
or it's better off not said.
To feedback effectively, we are now really careful about how we use both praise and criticism.
We're going to start off by discussing praise.
We always try and start with specific praise where possible.
Here's an example of some feedback that is not very specific.
Well done in the last quarter.
In this example, the player doesn't exactly know what has been praised and therefore doesn't know what to recreate. So, here is a better example of specific praise.
You really marked your opponent well in the last quarter, which made it really hard for them to find space.
This way, the children understand exactly what it is that you want them to replicate because of how specific you were, rather than just a generic, "well done." Admittedly, we do find it hard to deliver specific praise at all times.
But we try and do it when we can.
However, Carol Dweck has found that some praise can actually have a negative impact, and this is why we need to be really careful with the praise that we deliver.
She points out that if you just praise the outcomes, then children might think you're only impressed by when they win. So for that reason, we try to avoid saying things like, "Well done, you won," or "Good goal."
She has found that just praising the outcomes means that children tend to focus on just the winning, or sometimes they'll opt to play weaker opposition just to get that praise.
She found that this can increase child's anxiety around trying new things because they're actually fearful of failure.
Instead, however, she suggests that we should praise the process, and the process means the behaviours that enabled us to get to that outcome.
So instead of saying "good goal," we might say, "That was a good shot because you aimed in the corner." Or instead of saying "well done, you won," we might say "really good perseverance led to that result."
We aim to create a safe to fail environment. We tend to say things like, "I'm really glad that we made that mistake as a team. That means now that when we play our next match, we're all prepared." Now we're going to discuss criticism.
Like we said at the start, we find it useful to explain to the children that effective feedback comes from a place of love and honesty. One of the ways that we ensure that our criticism is well received is by framing the criticism.
For example, in netball perhaps, if a child is struggling to receive the ball, we might start by saying something like, "Today, your movement has been brilliant. You've been finding space really well."
We would then follow this up with something like, "Now let's put our hands up ready so our teammates are confident to pass the ball to you."
This way, the individual feels like they're doing well and they're in a better position to receive some criticism.
Another trick we use is trying to replace the word but with and.
We found that children, regardless of what you say before, only really hear what comes after the word but.
For example, "You've passed the ball really well using the instep of your foot, but we need to do this as well when we're tackling."
However, the complexion of the feedback sounds completely different when you replace the word but with the word and.
"You've passed the ball well using the instep of your foot, and now let's try and use the same technique when you're tackling."
Something else we tend to do is enable the children to learn from our mistakes.
We try to be vulnerable.
In particular with sensitive children, we tend to tell a story about how we overcame the same obstacle when we were younger, just like them.
For example, when a child dropped the ball in a cricket match, we told them a story about how we had done that in our past.
We told them that we were able to catch the next ball that came to us, not by dwelling on the drop catch, but actually envisaging the feeling of the ball coming into our hands. Now, for the outcomes.
We have found that when feedback is given without causing upset, that children actually welcome receiving criticism.
We've also found that morale is generally increased, meaning the sessions and matches just tend to have a more positive and better feeling about them.
We have seen that the children are more willing to make mistakes in front of their teammates and coaches, which is a great thing for learning.
Interestingly, we've also noticed that our teams have become hyper aware of what ineffective feedback looks like. They can notice when other teams and coaches are giving it out to one another, and they can appreciate the role it plays in our teams.
There's a lot to cover in this topic, so we'll be leaving plenty of links in the description.
We also dive deeper into this topic on our podcast, The Team Talk, with Tom and Jack.
We look forward to our next upload, which will be on behaviour management, where again we'll try and provide you with as much value as we can.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. All of the links to our socials are in the description, and I hope you do all of that YouTube business, that liking and subscribing stuff.
I've been Tom.
I have been Jack.
And this was How We Coach.